Welcome, everybody. I'm Selena Rezvani, and you are joining Women and Work Culture, all about how to include, engage, and retain women like your business depends on it. I am so honored and excited to be here with a friend and a master speech coach, Casey Erin Clark. Welcome.
Hi, Selena. I'm so excited to be here. That video was so cool, by the way. Can we just say how cool that video was?
Thank you so much. I'm so glad. I'm going to pass you along my designer's name who helped with it. But
awesome.
I love it too. Thank you. And for friends who are joining us, please drop us a note right away and tell us where in the world you're joining from. We would love to know. Ooh, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Philadelphia, New York City. I love it. Keep it coming. Our topic today is all about how to make sure women are heard in meetings. And one of the things that sparked this idea for me, this topic idea, was running a survey and seeing that only 35% of people said airtime in my organization, in our meetings, is shared equally by men and women. That's crazy low, and we need to change that. So today is a chance to start. And I want to be your fangirl for a minute, Casey, and just tell people some of the many wonderful things you've done. For starters, Casey is co-founder of Vital Voice Training, and she speech coaches and trains all kinds of interesting, different kinds of professionals in that role. But outside of that important work, Casey, what I love is you're also this incredibly accomplished performer and singer and actor. Some of your credits, I think people will recognize. Les Mis, City of Angels, and Sound of Music. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, how awesome is that? So I'm really excited to hear some of those different perspectives you're going to bring today. We also have a very personal, cool connection, which is that you were my TEDx coach when I took the TED stage 2 years ago. And I really felt like you were so instrumental in that process and helping me find my own authentic voice. So you're the first person I call when I have those, what I call, put on your big girl pants public speaking moments.
Cheers.
So excited we get to learn from you. Community, which, by the way, our community is from Lisbon, Portugal today, Brooklyn, New York. Loving this. Denver.
Yes.
Welcome, Sir Devi. Send us your questions for Casey. When you're thinking about getting heard in meetings, dealing with the being talked over stuff, drop us a line, let us know, and we'll try to get to your questions. My wonderful live stream producer, Michelle, is going to be sending those to me. So Casey, you have this incredible background and pedigree with performance. What kind of prompted you to pivot and start, public speaking coaching with women specifically?
Well, the sort of quick and dirty answer to that question is that being a theater artist is a terrible way to make a living, or at least to make a living consistently. So, every artist that I know including the ones that I think people would consider really successful, have other businesses, other jobs. We call them support jobs, we call them survival jobs. I am very, very fortunate to have found something that I truly love, that lights me up, that gets me excited every day. And if 10 years ago, when I was on the Les Mis tour, you had told me that I would be starting a business and that was going to become kind of my mission on this planet, I probably would have thought you were crazy. But this weird hybrid lifestyle that I've created has been very, very exciting. The other thing that I realized was that the skills that I have as an actor are valuable to people who want to speak up and be heard. And it goes beyond just the technical aspects of, using your voice in a way that's more musical and more resonant, or using your body language in a way that's more confident. It also goes into the observational skills that an actor has. What scene am I in? Who am I talking to? What do I want? And it also goes into the mental and the emotional aspects of voice, which we don't think about very often. But, our brain and our emotions affect our voices and our communication deeply, which I think we know on an instinctual level, but we don't often think about how much that affects us. So actors are used to speaking up through nerves. Actors are used to feeling strong emotions and speaking up through strong emotions. So those are all the things that we're able to bring to the table. And then on top of all of that is the mission aspect and the conversation around women's voices. In 2014, when we started the company, it was vocal fry palooza in the media. It was all about how women have these horrible, annoying vocal tics, and if they would just get rid of them, then people would take them seriously. And frankly, the media landscape around that was just awful. It was so oversimplified. It was so unnuanced. It ignored how the voice actually worked, and it made everything women's fault. And we were like, hell no. So we knew we had something to say around that.
Yes. I love that message. And you do bring a completely different angle, especially for those of us who've been trained in kind of business speaking. As someone who got an MBA, I can attest you brought like a whole new vocabulary and language. So I'm wondering, and then we have some great questions from our joiners today. What are some of the challenges, maybe the top 2 challenges you see when women come to you around perfecting that pitch or getting ready for that big public speaking moment?
Sure. So first of all, I would like to say we do work with gentlemen. You are welcome. You are welcome at Vital Voice Training. But of course, I do love working with women. The clients who come to us typically come to us at an inflection point. They're either preparing for a TEDx, or they're launching a product, or they have a new company that they're the face of. And that's where sometimes it's the more traditional public speaking aspects, but the voice and communication stuff pops up then with our clients who are on, let's use the popular term, executive presence track. So that would be, I'm a new manager and suddenly I have a team underneath me, or, I'm up for a promotion, but my boss thinks I don't sound confident. Can you help me? So those are sort of the moments that they come to us in. In terms of the challenges, I'd say I would really frame it around, as you just said, the training that we get in how to put on your serious voice so people take you seriously. And what that has looked like for so long, particularly for women and particularly for anyone who is outside Audre Lorde's mythic norm, the straight, cisgendered white man. So women and people of color in particular are asked to move towards a standard that doesn't look like them or sound like them. And that's how we put on authority. And so some people, I think, go down that path, try really hard to get it right, and then get really frustrated when it doesn't work or when it's not coming off the way they want to. And then there's also the people who have internalized that they will never be that. And so they end up kind of hiding or taking a step back and get frustrated with that part of it. So the core message that we bring to all of our clients is that there is no such thing as a right way to communicate. There's no way of doing it right. There's no perfect, there's no ideal in the sky to match. There's only you and your voice and all of the things that make you human inside the given circumstances that you're in. And that's the who, what, when, where, why of your scene.
Yeah, I love that because when you think about the lack of authenticity and trying to fit a mold, which I know I've felt in my career, that
Yeah.
pressure to conform and fit a mold,
Hmm.
it's kind of a lose-lose for everyone. They
Yeah.
can tell something's off, that you're not being
Yes.
authentic. And honestly, it colors your ideas, right? And the things you're willing to put forward. You're not
Hmm.
bringing like your best thinking when you're covering up, I think.
Absolutely. And it's exhausting. I mean,
Yeah.
that code switching is truly exhausting.
Well, I have a question that I think lots of people are going to be able to relate to, which is what to do when you're dealing with over talkers. You're in that meeting, you might have a culture of over talkers in your company where it's
Mhm.
normal. How do you recommend a woman in an everyday meeting kind of gets heard?
Yes. So, as someone who is occasionally an overtalker myself, the first thing that I would tell anybody to do is to really think very deeply about your scene, as we just discussed. But and as you put it, the culture. What is the meeting culture in this organization? Is it the kind of culture where if you want to get a word in edgewise, you have to interrupt? Is it a really competitive culture where people are trying to one up each other? Who has the power in the room? Who has the power in the room on paper, and who has the power in the room in reality? Are people rewarded for jumping in, or are they punished for jumping in? Like, what behavior is getting incentivized? So
Mm.
this is kind of the deep work that you do, and then the personal work is starting to think about your own stress response. So, what happens when we get into these situations where we want to speak up and we feel like we can't, or we're sensing a competition in the room and we got to like jump into the fray, is our stress response rises. And that can manifest in a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, your stress response is just your brain doing a brain thing, as Mary Poffenroth says so beautifully in her research on fear. So your
Mm.
amygdala is responding to a stressor in the environment, whether that's, Chad, the overtalker who always interrupts you, or a lion in the corner of the room. Your amygdala can't actually tell the difference. So it's going to send a cascade of physiological responses through your body. We have to figure out how to frame those. We have to figure out how to not let those hijack us.
Mm.
But we don't do that by like grabbing hold and kind of tensing up and like powering through, which I think is what a lot of ambitious self-starter perfectionist women do. Is we're like, gotta go hardcore, right? And kind of bear down into it.
Mhm.
You have to let those feelings move in your body, let those sensations move in your body, and then start to recognize, what is my stress response? Am I going down the fight path where suddenly I hate everyone in this room? Am I going down the flight path, which is I'm shrinking, I'm disappearing, get me out of here? Or am I going down the freeze path, which
Mm.
is I just stop everything, I just clam up and I hope to be invisible. So those sensations are the first thing to notice. Think about the culture, think about the big picture, and then think about the small picture, the internal picture, the emotional picture.
I love that. I love that idea of getting a read on the culture, right? That's always our job, is to know
Yep.
our context, right?
Yep.
But also getting in touch with your own fear response. What do you do? Do you barrel down? Do you go away? Do you
Yep.
sink into your chair?
Yep.
And I want to tag on to that invisibility comment you made. I saw this great tweet blow up on Twitter, and the basic premise of it was, being on unmute in a Zoom meeting today as a default is kind of the equivalent of reply all, meaning it's inconsiderate. It's
Yes.
inconsiderate and people won't like it. But as a woman, we already know through research you're less likely to be seen. Your ideas may be less likely to be counted. How do you prevent kind of being muted on a more symbolic level, being invisible?
Yeah. So first of all, some of this again, and all of this goes back to what can we control and what can't we control. And I think that women are so, particularly again, you're like go-getter, high achieving gals out there. We're so used to being like, what can I do to fix this? And the reality is that you can't, as an individual, fix all of this. So let yourself off the hook for that first, because I think we're really good at being self-critical and punishing ourselves when we're not doing what we think we're supposed to be doing. So in terms of like that thing about jumping in is, you are going to be nervous. And again, I think that we're used to framing nerves in that way of, oh, that means I'm not prepared. Oh, that means I don't belong in this room. Maybe I have some imposter syndrome. It's a very real thing that women deal with. And so we take it as a stop sign. And the thing that my partner Julie always says is, nerves are not a stop sign. Fear is not a stop sign. It's just, it's part of the package, right? Fear is the cost of admission to an interesting life. So what we have to do is we have to learn to embrace those fears and those nerves, and then jump in anyway. And that takes courage, and it takes practice. But yeah, figuring out the rhythm of the meeting is an interesting thing to explore as well. So when do you have to jump in? We're also in a framework right now where we are we're remaking meeting culture, like right now. It's all new. We have an opportunity here to create a new framework. So yeah, I think having a blanket, and this is again where it goes to the organizational level, setting some parameters. Everybody is on mute. You unmute yourself with your space bar in Zoom. You say your thing, or if you want to jump in, maybe type a comment in the chat box. There are creative ways to deal with this that do not put the entire onus of fixing meeting culture on the individual.
I love that. And I especially love that very practical idea that had not occurred to me, which is make yourself visible this other way, which is through chat. Yeah. Especially if it's a lot of over talkers. You're reminding people you're there. You might be reinforcing the point, the idea you just made. Yeah. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
So Casey, one of the things you taught me so much about and still teach me about is around body language and powerful, authentic, like what I call feel good body language. It's not pretending to be somebody else. You made a point at one time. You said sometimes when we're trying to jump in and kind of get a word in edgewise, we stop breathing.
Yes.
And I wondered if you could talk about that piece of body language. How do we prevent not breathing, right? That's the last thing we want to do.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that happens with the stress response. We kind of, that's part of freeze sometimes, and part of flight. Like, don't look at me. If I don't breathe, then I can control someone. But the other, we also use breath and often the lack of breath to control other people's perceptions of our emotions. Like, if I don't breathe, they won't be able to see how upset I am right now.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's like exactly the way to send yourself fully into the stress cycle and fully down the road of like, my emotions are going to hijack me. The other way that breath manifests itself in interruption culture is when we want to jump in, we'll do this little catch breath. We'll go, you know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
The breath only goes down to about here, and that raises the panic level again, because it's basically hyperventilating, right? So part of, and this will tie back into taking space and body language and stuff. So the ability to allow your body to expand when you take a breath in 360 degrees. We have all this beautiful rib cage area where we have the opportunity to expand. And right now, because we're living our lives on camera, I mean, and this was happening before now, but particularly now, we feel like we exist from here to here, right?
Right.
And our body's just, I mean, like the rest of my body is in leggings right now.
Right,
you know what I mean? My body's in a different world than this meeting is. Well, unfortunately, you have to bring your body to a meeting. You have to bring your full self to a meeting. So that, first of all, is just allowing your body to exist and not feeling like you're getting cut off. The other thing that, of course, camera does is it restricts our box of visual movement here. It's like my arm, right? You don't need to make giant gestures on camera. The camera will pick up very, very minute things. So if somebody's like overdoing it with the gestures, they're going to look like a crazy person, right? So you can be really simple. with on-camera movement, and it can be really effective. You can also play with depth on camera. You can play with like leaning in and leaning back. First of all, I would encourage people, again, especially now when we're in this like let's recreate everything space, to be experimental and to play, to see what feels good and looks good to you, as long as you're continuing to connect with the people that you want to connect with. Now, the simplest thing that we always tell people about taking space and allowing your body to take up space, and I would love for this to be everyone's new mantra. Your new mantra is let your butt be big.
I love it.
We're going to print t-shirts at some point. Hashtag let your butt be big. Yes. So what that is about is that when we go into a place of I'm nervous, I'm trying to be prepared, I want to jump in, all this stuff, we tend to go into what we call good girl posture, which is like all squeezed into the center, and it's like I'm ready to lean in, and I'm looking very eager, and I'm very prepared, and I'm very upright because I have excellent posture, and everything is just kind of like clenched in towards the center. Right? So the way to sort of combat that, and a nice thing you can do when you're prepping for a meeting that you think might be stressful, is actually allow your body to have gravity. You know, women have a very fraught relationship with gravity and space taking culturally. We are taught not to do it. We are taught not to embody, to have too much gravity, because it means that we're big, and that's like the worst thing you can be as a woman. So screw that. Let's just put that to the side. Screw that. You are allowed to take up space. Your body is allowed to take up space. Your voice is allowed to take up space. Your ideas are allowed to take up space. So letting your butt be big is exactly what it sounds like. You just let yourself drop into your chair, and that gives you the base of support to then grow out. And then you have the possibility of movement, as opposed to all that tension that's going to lead you to Tyrannosaurus Rex arms or a lack of breath or any of that stuff. So giving yourself that nice, strong base of support, and then allowing possibility of movement.
I love it. What a great way to ground yourself literally in that big butt, rooted to your chair. Yeah. And you can see how it gives you freedom, right? Yes. Once you do that, to breathe. I'll never forget such a important moment in my time being on stages was hearing Amy Cuddy say, what if you felt pride in your body? And that's another thing I think women aren't necessarily taught, to claim from day one. What if you had kind of prideful body movements where, you're really feeling good about what you're working with? I want to transition a little bit to something I think a lot of people can relate to or have experienced, and something I'm so passionate about. I basically shaped my whole TEDx around this, which is interrupting. And I want to first talk about it in terms of when it happens to you. If somebody's got those overtalkers, they're interrupters, they've percolated this brilliant idea and they're about to finish it, and like, bam, it gets cut off, and now everybody's moved on.
Yeah.
Like, what can you do with interruptions? How can you manage it?
So again, I'm going to go back to that thing of look at your context. And particularly in this part, it's about looking at your scene partner. Who's interrupting you? And why do you think they're interrupting you? As someone who has a bad habit of interruptions, sometimes I interrupt without even realizing what I'm doing, or I interrupt out of enthusiasm, right? It's like, I want to have a conversation with you. So it's not coming from a place when I'm interrupting somebody else of, I don't care what they have to say. I think it's really easy to make an assumption that the person that's interrupting you is like being a horrible person. Maybe they're just not paying attention, or maybe it was a mistake or whatever. So we can have that as an option. They may just be like a benevolent interrupter, in which case you can say, I wasn't quite finished yet, and then go on. You know what I mean? And you just take the floor back. There's also, I think, there is a reality that some people are bully interrupters, and they're just, they are in fight mode again, and then it becomes a head-to-head thing, and nobody wins in that case. Nobody wins. It just usually has to keep escalating. What you can do again is sit in that, let your butt be big. You don't have to push forward and engage. You can stand your ground. And in that case, I might tell someone to just keep talking. Like, don't allow yourself to be interrupted. Men do this all the time. Somebody
That's
else want to jump
exactly
in, they'll
right.
just keep going. They'll just
Yes.
so just stand your ground. But you don't have to do it with the like escalating. You can do it just with that
Yeah.
calm. And you may feel all the feels in your body, but that's okay, right? You just keep going. There's also something that I like to call the compliment and redirect, which is something like, great point, Steve. We'll talk about that in a second. Then you keep going, right? So there's all these different, but these methods have to honor the circumstance in which they're in and the person that you're talking to. And it may take some experimentation to figure out what works. That is a real thing. There's also the idea of amplification, which comes from Obama's White House. Even in Obama's White House, women were feeling like they weren't getting to speak up. So they would actually partner up with friends in the room. And a friend, when somebody was interrupted, a friend would say, I think Susan had more to say on that, Susan, and then throw it back to her. There are lots of ways to deal with it, but think about them in advance, because in the moment when our stress response is up, it's hard to think of a way to deal with it.
I think that's great. And I love your idea to keep right on talking, to redirect it. I would add one more thing that somehow works with 7-year-old twins, and also I think in business, which is this: as you keep on talking, right?
Yeah.
The kind of body caution, the kind of body signal, I'm not done yet, right? And I think that can be powerful. And I've seen quite a few men use that, and women. I want to flip it and tag off of a really good question we got from Shannon. And it's kind of flipping the script, maybe where you're not interrupted, but you want to jump in and potentially positively interrupt if there is such a thing. Are there ways to do that? Any, starters that you recommend in terms of doing that?
Definitely. So again, this goes back to, what is the rhythm of the meeting? Sometimes you're in a meeting culture where it is an on top of each other rhythm. When you want to jump in, there's sort of a 3-step thing that you can do. And all the steps kind of happen at the same time. First, you want to draw attention to yourself physically. In the acting world, we call this pulling focus. So that might mean shifting your posture in your chair. That might mean leaning forward. That might, and again, I'm demonstrating this on camera because you can see it really clearly. That might be putting up a hand. Draw attention to yourself physically. Pull focus. While you're pulling focus, take a deep breath. Don't do that catch breath thing. It's too fast, right? So take that breath and then jump in. You start the exhale and the sound on the same breath, right? Because a lot of times what we'll do is we'll take a deep breath. We'll go, I have something to say. And we'll let out half of our breath before we use it with the words. And what you want to do is you want to connect the exhale and the words. So shift your posture. I have something to say. Right? You've got a full breath support. You've got volume. You've got physicality, all helping you draw attention.
I love that. I love that. You're literally teaching us how to breathe, right? Because so much of the time when you have that golden idea, right, you are in anticipation mode.
Yes.
Like I've been there and I can't even hear what the other person's saying right now because I'm thinking about like my moment or, and I think you're giving us such an important foundation, which is breathe it through. Not only will you deliver it better, like you'll feel better, right?
Yes.
And
isn't that the point, right?
Yeah,
we want to feel better when we're doing this stuff. Not that discomfort is the enemy, because it's not. Discomfort is not your enemy.
Yeah, I think we all need to hear that. I think we need to hear that because what, brave idea doesn't come with some of that discomfort.
Totally.
Jen Abman Scott asked a great question, and she asked a question about balancing kind of executive presence, right? And maybe, confidence with authenticity. Do you have, thoughts around that careful balance?
Oh, Selena, we could talk about authenticity for hours. We have very complicated philosophies about all of these things. Again, executive presence for so long has meant putting on your serious voice and acting like a guy, like a white guy. You know what I mean? And what we're doing right now, what we're helping our clients do, is build a new version of executive presence, a version of executive presence that includes diverse voices and diverse bodies and diverse ideas so that we can expand that definition. So when I think of the other thing I'll say about authenticity is that authenticity is such a strange thing, because what feels authentic to me might not feel authentic to the person who's listening to me. And that's because we listen and we see through bias, right? So when we think about authenticity, we think about a few things. We think about, what are my core values? What are my core values just in the world in general, and what are my communication core values? How do I want to be seen? How do I want people to see me? What do I want them to feel when I'm talking to them? Knowing that helps you have a really strong place to come from. And then you have your innate emotional intelligence, which allows you to make those shifts. Because authenticity doesn't mean I bring every aspect of my personality to every interaction that I ever have, right? Nobody talks to a puppy the same way they talk to their boss. We all have, we are all full, we contain multitudes, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to bring everything to every interaction. We can make intentional choices about what we bring, what is best for this situation. So that's, authenticity is not a fixed point. It's knowing your core values. It's being able to access your own emotional intelligence within the circumstance. And then it's about, again, knowing what the circumstance is, or at least having an idea of what the circumstance is and staying present and flexible within that. So again, I could go into so much more detail on that.
Yes.
That's my word vomit about authenticity.
No, I love that. And keeping a firm handle on your values, right? It's really hard to steer wrong when that's kind of your North Star.
Yeah.
Before we build on that with one last question, I just want to put out there a few ideas for leaders or teammates, right? Where it's not on the individual, but it's more of a habit. It's a kind of practice within your organization. And just like you said, Casey, echoing women's points. If you're another woman and you see that woman being talked over, echoing her point, generously giving credit.
Yes.
When Casey suggested that originally, right? And calling that out. Thinking about maybe having a watchdog in your meeting, probably giving it a better name than that. But, who's going to help enforce and kind of call out norms that are not so great. Coming up with a list of operating norms for your meetings is such an important one, right? Because you can't change what you don't, articulate. So that's one way we can call out, hey, we're not really honoring this set of norms we came up with around meetings, that everybody gets airtime, everyone gets a chance. And one more is, there's an app called Gender Timer that I wanted to share with people. Gender Timer that actually counts who is speaking most and looks at it from a gender lens, which is pretty cool. I want to ask you one more question about this, Casey, which is, I talk sometimes about meetings with professionals as this is an ongoing audition for your job. This is not just that groan, I have to go to another meeting. This is a chance to influence. This is a chance to share some of your best ideas, to remind people why they hired you.
Yep.
Is there a mindset shift or an opportunity within meetings you want to remind people of that you really want women to see?
Totally. One thing that you and I have talked about is how women sometimes don't speak up unless they feel like they've got the best answer or the best idea or the most fully thought through concept. And so Cindy Gallop says, and I'm gonna curse here for a second. So warning, earmuffs if the children are listening. Cindy Gallop sometimes says bullshit like the men do. Because there is a thing where they feel perhaps more free or more psychologically safe to offer something that's not fully baked. Now, first of all, I think we should frame women's desire to make the best contribution possible as a positive and not a negative. But knowing what the context of the meeting is, if it is an ideas meeting, it doesn't have to be a perfect idea. It just has to be an idea, right? So freeing yourself from the expectation that what you contribute has to be perfect, because it's never going to be perfect, is a huge reframe. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to show up with something. And that in and of itself is an opportunity. And if perhaps I have been socialized, via, my family or my schooling or whatever, to think of jumping in as something that's rude, because that's a real thing that we do, that it might be inadvertently taking space away from someone else. And women are very conscious of that. we can think of the act of taking space, both physically and vocally, as an example that allows other people to feel safe doing that as well. So if you can frame it from a position of generosity, by speaking up, I may give permission to someone else to speak up. So presence, not perfection, and making space, to change the future, to make this better for the next person that comes along, with a little bit of my own courage on the line while I do it.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Like this cascading effect. It's
Yeah.
not just me and me in this
Yes.
moment. There's this cascading effect. That's beautiful. Casey, I can't think of a bigger gift, to give somebody than helping them find their own authentic, real voice. So thank you for everything you're doing to kind of elevate women and amplify them. You are doing it, and you're helping them be their own amplifiers. I would just say, having worked with you, you've made public speaking, training fun, like enjoyable, and most of all, triumphant. It's really felt much more triumphant. So again, thank you. There are links for people to stay in touch with Casey, to check out her latest article on powerful presence, and to read all about her and her organization. So please check that out. Follow her on Twitter. For all of those who want to stay in touch, please check out my LinkedIn Learning courses. I just put a new one out this week on confidence, getting your confidence back, building it. Please join the newsletter tribe at selenarezvani.com/signup, and follow me here on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch with you, hear what other topics you want to hear about. Thanks to all of you. I hope you stay healthy and well, and lead on.
Yes.